All right. Well, obviously we're going to be covering listening and reading. One of the things that I like to start off is for people to introduce themselves. Maybe tell me what your name is, what your major is, and also, do you feel like you struggle in this area when it comes to listening and reading? I can tell you I struggle with listening sometimes. I can be hearing someone talk. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm truly listening to what they are saying. I'm guilty of that. My wife has done that. I'll be talking, she's like, what? And so then I have to repeat myself and stuff. Or what about kids? Think about kids. Kids that they're asking you something to do, and you can kind of hear them, but you're not really listening. And so that happens. So kind of give me your experience, maybe kind of how you rate yourself in this area. I'll start with Stacy. We'll work around.
Okay, I'm Stacy. My major is special education, and for both of the topics, listening and reading, it depends on how interested I am in what I'm reading or listening to.
Okay.
And if I'm busy or distracted, I can't do either one effectively.
Okay. What about, have you had a class, with a professor, where it was very difficult to listen for that 50 minutes or hour and 15 minutes? When I used to teach government, I used to always love it when I would see the students' eyes start to roll back. I love that because I knew that they have blocked me out. They are not actually listening to anything I'm saying at this point. They can hear, me mumbling, like Charlie Brown or on that show or whatever, but not actually listening to what I say. So I always love it, when I'd see that, And then of course I would ask them multiple questions, to kind of get them back and engaged. But so have you encountered that with a class or two that it's just been hard to really listen?
Yes, government, history classes.
Which I taught government and history, 1870, to the present. Which it was always those classes, that they suffered through it, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, and so, and you are
I'm Ashton. I'm a human resource.
human
major.
resource. Okay.
I struggle with listening just based off of how the professor is presenting the information or whether I'm interested in the information. Just like she said, I struggle definitely with science. And when the professor doesn't understand that the students don't get it, or even economics, like I cannot get through economics. So.
And because in a lot of ways, like you're saying, they can kind of talk over a person's head. They feel like everyone should know this. I had a professor that taught college algebra, but I had him for astronomy. He also taught Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, all these various math classes and stuff. And he graduated when he was 15 years old in high school. He made one B, he said, when he was in graduate school. That was the only B that he ever made. And so, he spoke multiple languages, he played the guitar, the piano. He was working on his pilot's license, at the time when he was teaching the class. Very smart guy. And so he didn't always understand that other people struggled. And so, he would be going over these concepts that he would just expect people to know. And so he would lose that audience. They eventually stopped listening, because they were not understanding what he was trying to say. And so that happens quite a bit, I think. So, Amanda.
I'm Amanda. I'm not declared yet, but
Okay.
I'm pretty sure I'm going to go for psychology.
Okay.
I would say it just depends on what I'm interested in.
Okay.
If I can fully focus.
And so far, especially with you, working on deciding your major, what classes have you found that are easier to listen to and really kind of get your attention so far?
My psych classes are so much easier.
Which and what the reason why I mentioned that is that that's a good way to try to be deciding on a major. Once you take a variety of different classes in your gen ed, you will start finding certain classes that you really enjoy, that you're listening a lot more in depth to, and it's a sign. It doesn't mean that's the main reason why you should choose that major, but it at least kind of guides you. I loved government and history. I love those classes. I listened, every word I could. I wrote down every possible thing I could related to it. I found myself going to the library. If we talked about a person, I'd go try to find a book related to them. And then I would be reading about the book so I could get more information about that person. That's how I kind of knew that maybe this was the area that I should be going towards. So if you start finding more interest and you're looking for additional information, or you're going to the professor, asking them more questions related to that, I think it's a good sign, that might be a potential area for you. So as you're thinking about that, when you're taking those classes, if you see yourself going in that direction, I think it's a sign, it might be. So, Kayla.
I'm Kayla, and my major is environmental health, and I also have general business.
Okay.
they come good at both listening and reading, depending on the subject or depending on the class?
Okay, yes, and I would say some professors have a certain tone that's hard to listen to. You know, I've had a few like that, really nice, professors, but they just made you want to fall asleep, you know. So, I mean, it happens. So, all right, so some of the things that we're going to look at is, what does, or what do you mean by listening? So we're going to define that a little bit. You know, we'll talk about, why it's so important and, what keeps people, from listening. So there's a lot of different distractions out there. And then we'll start kind of focusing in more on the reading aspect. So we'll talk about strange, word, being able to look that up, focusing in on the main idea, when you're reading. And more importantly, which is my favorite thing, is that's the SQ3R. It's a strategy that you can use, and one of your handouts, shows you about the the 3R chart. And it's really good and effective, if you are, before you start a lesson, to go over this. And it can help you identify some of the things that you need to be doing while you're reading a specific chapter or something. So we'll go in more depth about that. I used this when I was in college. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to use it for every single class, but there are certain classes that I think this can come in handy. And so we'll talk about that. And it's also preparing you, in some ways, for a test, especially if you have to do any like short answer or writing type essays on an exam. So it can help. So let's define, the meaning, of listening. First, obviously you'll see a definition there, which we'll talk about. What is listening to you? When someone says, define listening, how would you define listening? And I'm going to go with Stacy because I can see she's really, concentrated, thinking about it. And I put this up here on purpose, just in case if you get stuck, you can kind of cheat a little bit. So I did that specifically there. So.
Well, we're learning in my intro to counseling class about active listening,
Okay.
and so this isn't really directly answering the question, but active listening is when you restate what the speaker said to you,
Okay.
so that they can clarify any misunderstandings. So if you're thinking, okay, I need to absorb this and be able to tell it back to them, then you're focused more on listening to someone. That's more in a conversational.
Yeah.
Not so much in a class, I understand, but active listening.
Yeah, I like that. And so, Kayla, yes, I told you I was going to pick on you. What is your definition of listening?
I think it's just tuning into someone and,
Okay.
like she said, being able to restate what they've told you, because you can hear
Absolutely.
someone and just not be paying attention at all, and just kind of like background noise, but when you tune in and just really know what they're talking about.
Yeah. At the end of the day, it's really just sitting down and actually listening to what they have to say. Not blocking it out, not trying to tune it out, but actually listening to the words that they are saying and making sure that you understand the words that they're saying. For example, some people, when they're talking, they may be talking to you, you might not understand a certain word or something that they're saying, and in some cases, you don't want to, interrupt and say, I don't understand, what you're talking about that. They feel like, they'd be embarrassed for not asking that. I had this one friend who always used really big words, and so you could only understand about half of what he was saying because of all those big words that he would use. And so, so I'd constantly have to ask him, can you clarify, what is this word? I don't care if I look dumb or not. I don't know what that word is. And so like if you take an oral communications class, for example, if you're up there saying all these really big words, could you lose, kind of the message or the thing that you're trying to get across because you're not using words, that your audience understands. And eventually they're going to tune out and not listen to you. So, you do need to do it at a certain level where they understand the ideas that you're trying to get across. And I think that's really, what it's getting at, is understanding and, and the feelings behind, those certain words that you're using. Also, it's good to look at the fact that, hearing is, only part of the process, and that listening and hearing are kind of different. Because I was telling the man, a second ago about the kids. You can hear your kids talking in the background. It doesn't necessarily mean you're listening. And does anyone have an example, maybe a recent example of that? Amanda, you're smiling, so I'm assuming that you do have an example.
My daughter was just talking and talking, and I heard her, but I was focused on making dinner, and she was just going, and then she's asked me a question, and I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah, it happens all the time, and now my son's young. He's 23 months old. He'll be 20. He'll be 2 next month, and so he's babbling. He can say no yes, daddy, mommy, little things. But I can imagine as he gets older, he's going to be asking me things, and I've got to be careful because I kind of go, yeah, and so there's no telling what I could agree to down the road. So I know I'm going to have to be careful with that. And I think we do that in a lot of cases, that sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing it. We're just so kind of in tune to doing that a lot of times. But also, I think you make a good point, and that is the fact that you have a lot of stuff going on, and so it's hard, to sit there and really tune in and listen to every single thing when you're trying to, get dinner ready, God knows what else, so there's a lot of other things that are moving around, and you're multitasking. And so, I know that I'm going to make mistakes as I get older, and I'm not going to be listening. And I'm sure, he'll probably be playing both of us, the wife and I, trying to get what he wants because we're not paying attention. So, when we talk about good listening skills, some certain things that we need to look at. Concentrates, on the speaker. So that's probably an important thing. So when someone is talking to you, it's good to actually, have eye contact, listen to them. You can kind of like when you're teaching. And you can see students, out there, and you can kind of tell the ones that are really listening and the ones that are just kind of hearing the words, because it's the eyes rolling back, right there, or you see them just kind of, looking over at some corner, or they're tuning out at a certain point. You can kind of catch that. So good eye contact, making sure that you're paying attention to them, that concentration is good. Also interpret, the speaker's words. So I think it's important to understand what words they are saying. And I would always say, if you don't know what a word means, there's nothing wrong with asking. I think that's always important. Because if you don't, you can go along with that, listening to them, and you may miss a very crucial part of what they're trying to get across. And that's where you start getting some confusion going on. And also, of course, evaluates their meaning, and of course responds effectively. So after you listen to them, I think that you go into that next stage that Stacy was emphasizing, more of the active. Listening, because then you're restating, some of what they said, and that kind of goes back, to clarifying stuff. So when you restate it, if somehow you were not able, you missed something, they can, correct that at the time, or define the meanings specifically. So when we talk about why is good listening important, so because of good listening skills, you can accurately respond, which I think is good. You can also make better use of your time, so you don't constantly have to say, "What'd you say? What'd you say?" Which could get annoying on the other person's side, when you keep asking them. I'm guilty of that because sometimes I'll be watching TV and then my wife will be asking me something, and then I stop what, and then or I only hear certain pieces of it. So I get kind of stuck, on certain shows, Walking Dead specifically. So avoid confusion and mistakes, so that's always good. Improve your relationship. That kind of goes back what I need to be doing there. I need to, actually, maybe pause, or mute, The Walking Dead, so I can actually listen, But I get caught up in it. I'm telling you, I just, I really get caught up in that. So, and I don't, how many watch The Walking Dead, by the way? Daryl, we're gonna find out what's gonna happen next week. It's not good. So, good listening helps you, on the job, which I definitely think that's important, because imagine your boss comes to you and asks you to do a specific assignment, and they're telling you the steps that you need to take, and then you're tuning them out, not paying attention. Eventually you're going to have to go to them and probably ask them again, now what'd you say? And that's going to look bad. And so it's better to, listen, maybe jot some things out. They're talking to, obviously the active listening and actually restate some of the, the tasks that they want you to do. I think that's crucial, on there. And then of course friends and at home. So when we talk about, distractions, things that, keep people from actually listening. One, external distractions. So glaring lights, nearby activity, noise. Stacy, you mentioned that kind of at the beginning, the noise factor. It's really hard to listen. Have you ever had a class where you are trying to listen, you're taking notes, and you are hearing people talk? Does that drive you nuts?
Yes.
Especially, if you know that it's really important material, you're coming to, or I can't tell you how many times we'd be going in there for the study guide, and we'd be going over kind of a review for the test. And then you'd have people talking, doing whatever, and you're thinking, I'm trying to get everything down here because I want to do well on this test. And then they're talking, have private conversations. And so that can be very difficult. And so what do you do in that situation, by the way? What would you do, Stacy? Get up and scream at them, throw their books on the ground?
No, I honestly just kind of quietly suffer through. I don't know how you would handle that.
Okay.
What is an effective way to handle that?
I think for you, you should actually throw all their stuff on the ground there. And I emphasize you, on this. You should try this. Videotape it so I can watch it, of course.
Okay.
And so, well, one thing you can always do is one, you can do the dirty look. That's always a good one. Kind of the fish eye is what my professor used to always call it, the fish eye. Or you can, look at the professor, and normally, you can kind of, get a little deal, hey, this little side conversation over there. Try to be discreet about it, but and a lot of times, the professor, he knows what's going on, and so or she. So all you have to do is just kind of point that out. And there's been times where I've said, hey, this stuff's really important. I need to, be able to hear this. I can't hear. And most of the time they're okay. Sometimes they'll give you, some looks and stuff, but who cares? At the end of the day, as long as you get the material that you need, that's what counts, And so, what are some other, external distractions? We have, glaring lights, activity and all that stuff. But what else are some distractions, when you're trying to listen? What could also get in the way?
I have my phone.
Okay, phone. I think that's phone. TV. So what else? Anything else? What about video games? You like video games? I like the old stuff, so I still play the Sega Genesis. But now it's really cool because they've got like tons of games like all built into one system. So yes, that is a distraction, and it's hard to listen to, when I'm playing Sonic. So, it is difficult. But so that's one choice. Now, impatience. Sometimes, have you caught yourself being impatient? You're kind of eager. You want to just kind of get to it. What are my options? Don't, explain all the stuff to me. What happens, let's say you're at Sam's Club, and they're trying to sell you on DirecTV or something. They're giving you the pitch, all these details. But you may already have in your mind, hey, I want DirecTV. I know I'm going to do it. I'm going to get this. So let's just, get past the spill, or maybe a car, and they're giving you that sales pitch, and they're wanting to, they want you to listen to all the little things that you could potentially get. And what happens when you say, all right, I already know what I want. Let's just do this. Has that happened to you or anything? What's your example of that? So, okay, we'll put you on the spot. Laser it in right there. What do we think when we talk about, the impatience part? When you're, when you're listening, you just kind of want to get to it already. Give me an example, if you have one. Okay, I'm going to go back to Stacy then. Oh, yes. Yes, because Stacy always has an answer. Yes, always an answer. Impatience. You just want to get to it.
It's usually with my children.
Okay.
And especially like if I'm cooking dinner, like you said, or trying to do something else, and they're giving me more information than I need, I just want to cut to the chase. Just tell me what I need to know. And my daughters tend to be more verbose than my sons.
Okay.
So I can't think of anything other than that.
No, I think that's good. I think that's good because, that's a real life experience that you're going to encounter, and maybe frequent, I don't know. So.
Yeah.
So I think that's good. Obviously, preoccupation, dealing with other issues or problems, so that kind of ties into it as well. You got a lot of stuff going on. It's hard. It's hard to listen to everything when you're thinking, what, I've got homework I got to do here. I've got to get dinner ready here. Now they're wanting me to deal with this. It's not really part of my original plan that I was going to do that day or that night, and it gets frustrating, and you just want to block it out. So that happens all the time. Of course, prejudice, issues, and this is culture, sex, race, appearance, that can distract you. For example, would you have a hard time listening to someone who had, spiked up hair, kind of a mohawk, with red tips? Would that be difficult? Maybe, I don't know. Amanda's saying no, so that's not going to bother her at all. I'm going to have to try this one day, and we're going to see. We're going to have I'm going to ask if I could sit in on a midterm meeting one day. I'm going to have the tips. I was going to see. Yes. I've had my hair green and red before, by the way. I call it my Dennis Rodman stage. I had it green on one side, red on the other. And it's kind of a buzz cut. So it's back around 96. So, yeah. So it was crazy. So false assumptions, you already know what, the speaker, will say, or the topic is over your head. So that kind of blocks it out where it's hard to listen. So now we're switching over to more dealing with reading. And if you notice your handout here that I have, about reading, I think this is a really good thing that you can potentially look at. It's going to be more in depth. We'll talk about some of what's in here, but there's also little exercises that you can do to kind of strengthen, some of your reading ability, and more importantly, dealing with like the main issue, how to identify that. It gives you some examples in there. which I think is really good. And so, strange words, and what we're saying by that is sometimes when you are reading, you encounter words that you have never seen before. And how many times have you been reading your textbook, or you come across a word that you're not really sure what that word is? You know, it happens all the time. You know, I still remember it was my first semester of college, you know, and you know, it was I was having to take basic grammar, so it was a remedial, you know, English course. And we're reading a passage in there, and they had the word insidious. Never heard of that before at that time. You know, I mean, some people have, but you know, I hadn't at the time, so I had to look it up. So obviously, I'm going to the dictionary. You know, I had to look that up. And so I think that's important, being able to identify that. But you can also look for synonyms. You know, words that have the same meaning. So, and that can help you kind of, you know, narrow it down and identify certain words. Or, you know, antonyms. You know, the opposite, you know, of that meaning. So looking in the dictionary and finding other words that go with it, I think, is good. Also, like, for example, when you write a paper, you know, maybe, you know, you feel like your vocabulary is not very strong. So one of the things that you can do is type in the word that you do know, and then you can, you know, highlight that, look at the, you know, for synonyms, you know, on Word, and find a stronger word that you could potentially use. That's helping you build, you know, some of that vocabulary at the same time. And obviously, you can go to Merriam-Webster. And the reason why I put that on there is that not only can you look up the word, they have a deal that you can click where it will actually pronounce the word for you, which I love, you know, because there are some words that I just have no idea how to pronounce it, or I get a little nervous about trying to pronounce that, and so I go there and I can actually look it up, have listen to the voice on there, and it's pretty good. And I can tell you, I've done that quite a bit of times. They even have other types of things out there where you can look up medical words as well. So, I mean, how many people have a hard time, pronouncing certain medical words? So, I mean, with technology nowadays, it's so much easier, to be able to look up these types of terms. How many of us would say that we actually look up words in the dictionary in this semester, at least one time? I'm not seeing no hands.
Online dictionary.
That counts too.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay, there we go.
Yeah.
I was
Okay.
like, I'm not going to get my book
Yeah,
out.
I actually have a book at my house of the dictionary. I'm old school too, so I have that. But I do like, getting online, largely because I can click on that button and actually listen to the pronunciation of that. I think that's good to have because, I mean, some words I have a good understanding about what and how to say it. But there's a few I'm a little iffy on, and I want to play it safe. I don't want to say it the wrong way. So yes, Merriam-Webster, great place, good source to go to for that, and to look up stuff. When we talk about the main idea, that's the central point, whatever you're reading, the main idea of that. And the majority of us, when we are reading, various chapters and stuff, there is a main point, what they're trying to get across. You can even approach that not only with stuff that you're reading, approach it as, in your class, or, with the lecture. When you are, with your professor and they are covering a certain deal, there's normally a main point that they're trying to get across, material-wise, for that class. And so you can actually take that, break that down into the supporting details, that, they are discussing. So if you're talking about, let's say, those captains of industry, for example, in a history class, because everyone loves history. They may, talk about, captains of industry and their impact, and then they're talking about specific names and the details that go with that. So, but that still main idea is talking about those captains of industry. And so this just kind of shows you a little mapping, that you can do. So, for example, let's say you read, chapter 2 of one of your sociology books. You can, kind of map it out. You can put the main idea, center there, write it out, what you think the main idea is, and then you can kind of do the bubbles and create supporting details. That can help you identify what you're reading. Because how many of us have read through a chapter and then thought to ourselves, I really don't know what this chapter is even saying. And you can't remember it 5 minutes later. I've always, felt that you don't really know it until you start writing things down. It was just easier for me, for it to stick when I did that. I'm just reading through it, I'm going to remember bits and pieces of it. So, I mean, that's why I think this part is good, just mapping it out. And it's normally pretty simple. So after you start reading a little bit, try to write down that main idea. In those supporting details. This SQ3R is by far one of the best systems that I like. How many of you have even heard of this? Okay, a couple, so that's good. I heard about this. I think it was freshman year, college. It was actually in Student Support Services that I was a part of. The lady there, told me about it. She gave me a whole bunch of material on it, and then I would start to use it. It doesn't mean that I used it for every single class, but I did use it, on occasion. So what is it? It's reading comprehension method. So that's what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to help you with your reading comprehension. There are 5 steps. So the first one, survey, then question, read, recite, and review. Now I will say that if you go online and you type in SQ3R, on occasion they have different words on there. Like for example, when you see this survey, sometimes they say skim. So they change some of the wording around a little bit. So, if you just go out there later today and you say, I want to learn more about this, don't get confused if you see some different wording. I mean, it's the same type of system. They just change the word around a little bit. And so, an example, survey. You look through the assignment. And so this is how you can apply it, to your class. You look over the assignment, what you're supposed to be doing. Maybe it's a certain chapter, whatever it may be. Then, second, is question. You turn the heading. So like if it didn't say chapter 2, and then each of the headings, you try to turn that into a word, or to a question. And so give me an example of one of the chapters that you have been reading here recently. Kayla. Oh yes, but spot. Maybe Amanda, she's a wingman, she can help you there, potentially. So what is a chapter that you have recently read? Just kind of kind of a heading more or less of what it was covered. An example, Stacy, you can help too, potentially.
Let's see, in developmental reading, the last chapter we read was, I think it was on reading comprehension.
Okay. So let's just say, we'll just take reading comprehension. We'll
Okay.
say that. So that chapter 2, reading comprehension. We're just going to make that up there.
Okay.
We'll go on with it. So one of the things that you can do is, what is reading comprehension? You turn it into a question. And then what do you have to do? You have to, obviously read it then. And so you have to, find the answer. So when you start writing these questions down, using the headings in there, or what's in bold, on there, then you actually have to read through it and find the answer and then plug that in. And then after that, you recite it. You simply say out loud the answer, whatever you found. And that allows you, not only because you're hearing yourself saying it, so I mean, it's just the way, it's that repetition, you do that. I mean, it helps pretty good. And then obviously review. And that's just going back, going through your notes, looking it over. They say it's good, to do this within a 24-hour period of, actually taking the notes and jotting stuff down. So, for example, let's take a look real fast, at this little worksheet. You can actually, you take this, let's say you're home one night and you're going to have to read a chapter, for tomorrow. This is a little worksheet that you can do. You can print these off, and you can just use each chapter. You could use this worksheet. So, for example, what does it say? On there it says, it has your name, your date, SQ, 3R chart, title of the work. You can just simply put the chapter that you're, covering. Reading comprehension chapter 2 or whatever. And then a survey, it says record, important titles and subtitles from the work, so you can be jotting that down. And then, the question, you write down, who, what, when, where, and why, questions from the main topics that you're covered. And then obviously you read, so that's when you start, trying to answer the questions, that you posed up from above. And then recite it, so you are basically talking about recording the key facts and phrases, as needed for each question. And then obviously create a summary paragraph for each question. And you're just breaking it down. And even though this is going to take more time, it's actually probably going to save you time in the long run, because what happens when you do this? One, you're probably going to comprehend it a little bit better than just simply listening to class and just jotting some notes down, or just going through your book at night, skimming through it, and then hopefully that's good, because at one point, you're going to have to start preparing for the test, and so this is already helping you get ready for that test. Because what can you do? You can go back and look at your notes. You've already summarized the main points. And so that's going to be good. Also think about when your professor is creating the exam, especially if it's an exam that has essays or short answer questions. In some ways, by you asking who, what, when, where, and why, that could be something that would relate to what he's doing or she's doing when creating that exam. You're kind of, getting to the professor's head in some aspects and have to ask those questions. And I think, it could potentially help. I was always really good at, getting close to the questions that would be on the exam. And so I had this one professor, It was a lot of, English history class. I took several with this lady, Dr. Westmoreland. Really nice lady, except for she would slap you. Yes, she would slap you. She never slapped me, so I was happy. Yeah, you would think that there would be a lawsuit waiting to happen there, but I'm telling you, she was old school. She had her hair in a bun, really big bun. She was from Austria, and so she had been working at this college for quite a while. Her son was a lawyer, her daughter was a doctor. She pushed them every step of the way, and she meant business. And so when you showed up to class, let's say you wasn't listening or paying attention, she would come over there, slap your hand, and tell you pay attention or get out of the class. And then she'd go back and do her thing. And so, but what I would do is I would try to come up with questions. When we were listening, to her lecture, I would try to come up with questions and various things. And a lot of times before our, the day of the review, she would give me 5 minutes. And she'd say, okay, now I know you've been thinking of all these questions. What questions do you think are going to be on the exam? And so I think I was actually creating the exam for her, I think. Because, she did this every time, and then she'd use my questions, but she just changed the words around a little bit. She did it every time. And so, but I was paying attention to listening to what she had to say during those lectures and some of the readings, and so I would take the time, and she knew I was doing that. And I think that was part of the reason why she would kind of let me do that in class. And so it's just something to think about. You can try this out, and always remember you can modify it. You can change this around. You can kind of make it your own. You can take some of it and leave some of it. Out of this, what would you say is probably the most important step, in your opinion? So if we had to go back, survey, question, read, recite, review, if you were going to make it your own, what do you think that would you use all of it, or maybe emphasize certain things more than others? If you were going to put this into practice. I'm going to go with Stacy, because I like picking on Stacy. So what would you do if you decide that you were going to try this out? And maybe in some degree you do kind of try this, to some degree.
Well, I think, in my opinion, the thing that's the most effective is tackling it from reading, the speaking and hearing, and then the writing it down. You're taking it in, and there's output, and you're using all of your senses, basically, to absorb it.
So would you say in some ways, you're kind of skipping a little bit of the survey part? Because normally, if you have an assignment, you go in there and you're going to start reading. Or do you go through a chapter when they have all the different things in bold or subheadings? Do you look at all of those, just kind of glance over the survey part before you really get in depth with reading?
I hardly ever survey anything, and I'm really bad about skipping the headings. I just jump to the text.
Yeah.
So that's someplace where I could maybe try to make some changes.
And honestly, I would say that this system is probably, I think, you see it more potentially high school, freshman, sophomore year of college, probably. And I would always say, we can give you all these various techniques to use, and some of them I think are really good, but some of these you may say, I don't want to do all this completely. I always say take what you want out of it. And I'd always say try it one time, in a chapter.